Welcome, my friends, to another episode of ToleTown. This project is for July 2025, and the theme for this month is Halloween Scream. So what came to my head is what you're going to see on this project. And so I think we should go ahead and get started. The surface that I'm using, you can purchase from CD Wood at cdwood.com, Covered Distributing. And if you want, you can put it on any old surface that you have in your stash. As always, you can reduce and enlarge this pattern as you need to. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to give this kind of a unique, I don't know if it's unique, but a cool background. So the first thing I did was I gave this a coat of baby pink, and then I let it dry. And I got out my sanding block and sanded this so I have a nice smooth painting surface. And the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to grab yourself some paper towels. It doesn't matter if it's embossed. I would suggest using the side that's not embossed for what we use it for later. And you want to get out some dragon fruit. And so you want to work a little bit on the quicker side. What you're going to do is you're going to thin down that dragon fruit, kind of juicy. And we're going to give this a really quick coat of that really wet, juicy dragon fruit all over. Even though some of it's going to be covered up, we still want it to get covered with this thin, juicy dragon fruit. Dragon fruit sounds like it should be juicy, right? And the next thing you're going to do, and this doesn't even have to be clean water, because if you can see up here in the corner, my water is dirty. I'm going to dip my fingers in it, and I'm just going to splash and flick this water on my background. And I want to kind of get it all over, but not, it doesn't have to be a whole lot. All right, you don't want this to dry. This is where your paper towel comes in. So now I'm going to need a little bit longer for my surface. I'm going to put this paper towel down and just rub it like that so I drink up that water that I flicked on there. And hopefully, yeah, there we go. We got a cool background for our surface. It kind of reminded me of sherbet ice cream. So we're going to let this dry, and then we're going to put our pattern on and start doing some base coating. So I'll be back. All right, so once I got that cool background done, it reminds me of raspberry sherbet, I went ahead and put the pattern on for all little 3 cups of ice cream or cones of ice cream. And we're going to work on this center piece first because the other 2 are sitting in front of it. And so I went ahead and did the base painting. I based in all the elements for the ice cream cone. So what I did first is I painted in the candy cane, which is, of course, a Halloween candy cane. So it was painted in graphite. I painted in the pumpkin with burnt orange. The stem is Irish moss. The ice cream itself looks really yummy. It was painted with a new color called Fresh Mango, and I'm really loving this color. And then the cone is painted with Honey Brown. So I did 2 coats on everything. I didn't really do 2 coats on the pumpkin, but if you want to, it's okay. So now that I have this all base painted in, I'm going to come back and I'm going to put the detail pattern on. So I've put the detail pattern on for the ice cream cone, for the divisions in the ice cream, and for the divisions in the pumpkin. I didn't put the face on, and for the stripes on the candy cane. We're going to work on this ice cream cone first. So what I want to do is I want to dry brush some highlighting with Moon Yellow. Let me get a little bit closer. So this is going to go through puberty, I'm pretty sure. It's not going to look good for a while, all right? So just be prepared. So I'm going to dry brush some moon yellow there, a little bit here, a little bit here. If you can get up in between your drips, that'd be great. I'm also going to go into each of these little squares, or whatever we're going to call them, and dry brush a little bit of highlighting in there. It can go through the lines. We're going to float shading, so it'll be okay. You can do it more like lines, not circles in the middle of the squares, because the circles don't look that good. Okay, let's get a little in there. And so as long as we have the, it's already looking more like an ice cream cone. As long as we have the moon yellow on our brush, let's go ahead and dry brush some highlighting on our ice cream. Might as well, right? As long as we have it in our brush. Make this ice cream look yummy. Hopefully by the time we get done. Putting that highlight on there makes you able to see the pattern I put on too. So that's kind of nice. So I'm just treating each little section or fold of ice cream as its own little section. And we're going to dry brush a little bit inside those drips. There we go. That's looking better all right too. And as long as we have moon yellow on our brush, we can go ahead and dry brush some highlighting on our pumpkin. Might as well get it all out of the way while we have it in our brush, right? Pumpkin's really going to go through puberty, but you've painted pumpkins with me, so you know it's going to go through puberty. So let's go back down to our ice cream cone. And what I want to do is I want to float some shading on that ice cream cone with milk chocolate. So I'll do the obvious places first, down the sides and across the bottom. Just a nice soft float of milk chocolate. So I'm going to turn this over so I can do the other side easier. I am going to go up against where will eventually be those ghosts. Tuck it in here. Kind of slide the corner of your brush through there. All right. It's looking better the further along we get, which is always a good thing. You don't want it to look worse the further along you get. I'm going to tuck some up next to these drips. in here. So we want to tuck a little bit of shading, that milk chocolate. We're going to go under this little rim that's there. You know how ice cream cones have that little flat part or a little raised section. So there's that too, going on both sides of it, top and bottom. And then I'm going to float some shading in the top of each of those little diamond shapes. I want to go around these, oh, what do you call them? The drips. Might as well get those done too. Let's see. Let's go around this splash of ice cream that's going to eventually be ice cream splashing. All right, now we can go in the tops of each of those diamond shapes. As best you can. Okay. Oh, yep, it's starting to look like an ice cream cone. That's for sure. All right. So now what I want you to do is I want you to take a little bit of honey brown and add a little bit of moon yellow just to lighten it up a little bit. So we don't want it to be as bright as moon yellow. So like half and half. And what I want to do is I want to line those diagonal lines. I'm going to move my brushes. Okay, just to highlight them a little bit. All right. So the paint was thinned down just a little bit, not a lot. I'm going to go the other way. Just to highlight those, the edges that form these little, oh yeah, that's looking pretty good. Almost edible. All right, so we want that to dry. I'm going to add a little bit more to this little section right here. We want that to dry, and then we're going to come back and we're going to deepen the shading a little bit. I think what we can do is we can dry brush a little bit brighter highlight on this rim right here with moon yellow plus warm white. Just a touch of warm white. You need it to be lighter than warm white, but I don't think I want it to be completely white. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to get out some burnt umber, and we're going to deepen the shading like around the drips, under that little rim there, and down the sides and in the very bottom. We're going to do that with soft floats of burnt umber. Just be sure to blend it out really well so that you get a nice soft float. So I'm going to go under this drip here, and then under that little rim. Turn this over and go above also. I did get a little brown on here, but it'll be okay. I'll wipe it off. And I'll go ahead and go around this splash of ice cream that will be there eventually. And I'll continue it down the side. We need to come in here a little bit. Next to the little ghosts. Around this drip, and tuck a little bit in there. And I also need to go next to the drips. There again, I got it on that ice cream, but it'll be okay. All right, one more little spot. And I'm just going to do one quick little highlight with warm white. That's going to go up this side. And it's going to be straight warm white. Okay. All right. So I'm going to call the ice cream cone done. Let's go up to our pumpkin. And we already dry brush highlighting on those sections. Let's go ahead and float some highlighting with moon yellow. And I'm going to go on each section on the outside of it. And yes, it goes on kind of bright, but it will tone down. So each little section, the outside edge of it, gets a float of moon yellow, including that center section, which ends up getting floated on both sides. Reminder, I told you, pumpkin's going to go through puberty, okay? So don't be shocked. Alrighty. So what I want to do is I want to float some shading on this ice cream. And I'm going to do that with spiced pumpkin, I do believe. I think that'll add a nice little pop to the ice cream. So I'm going to go down the sides first. But I'm still going to treat each section like it's its own little place to float, okay? Okay. On this bottom section, you want to go ahead and take it down the drip next to the skull. So let's go ahead and turn this over and get the other side. I'm kind of walking that color out a little bit to give myself a wider float. All right. Let's go ahead and float this into the bottom of each drip. All right. I'm going to add some of this shading in the bottom of each drip. Walk it up a little ways. And let's go ahead and on these little curved parts where the drips start, we want to float some shading there also. So this one gets a pretty big shade there. And one more. All right. I need to pop a little bit of shading in on this strip where it's next to the skull. All right. So now, while I let this shading dry, I'm going to go up to my pumpkin. And if you've painted pumpkins with me at all, you know that my very first shading is going to be with red. So I'm going to float some country red shading on my pumpkin, and I'll get a little closer to that puppy. It's not pumpy, it's a pumpkin. And we're going to go next to each of those highlight floats that we did, except of course the outside one. We just need to put some red into our pumpkin. We may come back and do a wash of color over it depending on how much oranger I want it. Okay, so I'm going to go through by each of those little highlight floats that I did. It's not a real big, wide, dark float. It could probably use a little bit more color than what I left down there. In fact, I'm going to come through and add another float just to give it a little bit more red. All right. So now let's go back to this ice cream. And what I want to do is I want to deepen the shading a little bit. And I'm going to do that by picking up fresh mango, which was the base color, and a little bit, let's see, fresh mango and a little bit of country red. And I'm just going to blend them in the same spot. That was a little too much country red, so I'll grab some more fresh mango. Yeah, there we go. Getting the color I really like. Alright, so now I'm going to take this color and I'm going to float that shading again with this fresh mango country red mix. And that just gives it even more of an ice cream sherbet kind of look. Got a little carried away there. Since you've already done this once, this shouldn't take as long because you already know where you're going, right? And again, I'm going to come down next to where the skull is going to be. And in the bottom of each of those drips, next to where the ghost ice cream will be. Right. So while we let those floats dry, and you can see they're not perfect floats, they're kind of choppy, although this one I'm going to soften a little bit. Alright, we are going to come back and add some shading along the lower edge of each of those little layers of ice cream. But we need to go back to our pumpkin now, and we're going to float some more country red, and this is going to go in the top and the bottom of each section. So I treat each section as its own little space to shade. So I'm going to float some country red in the bottom of each section, and I do walk it up a little bit. Okay, I don't mean to be silent, but not a whole lot to say while you're doing this. And I'm going to do the same thing in the top of each section. So I'm going to tuck some country red into the top. And this helps give it that roundness. And it also puts some red in there. Alright, let's go back to our ice cream with the mix again of fresh mango and country red. We are going to float along the bottom edge of each of these sections. And that means I'm going to go in here and float that again. I think I need a little bit more country red. So I'm going to float this little area right here again. And this one. Okay. Then I'm going to go along the bottom edge of this area. I am going to go ahead and mop that a little bit to soften it. And then we'll go up to the next section and do the same. Just continue on up. Till we get to this little section where the pumpkin is tucked in. Alright, so I think we can go back to our pumpkin. We're just going to keep going back and forth. Then we're going to need some burnt umber. And we're going to float shading with burnt umber, and that's going to go wherever we floated the country red, on each of the sections and in the top and the bottom of each of those sections. Flip this over and get those other sections. Sections are actually called flutes. Alright, so I'm going to let this dry a little bit and then I'll come back and float the tops and the bottoms. For right now, we want to get out some warm white, and we're going to dry brush a little bit brighter highlight on our ice cream. And I'm going to go ahead and use my Princeton Lunar blender to do that. I'll go back and forth between my Langnickel short rounds and my Princeton Lunar blender. So I'm going to just tuck some warm white highlights into that ice cream. And it's going to stay kind of in the top area. It's going to depend on which side the little layer of ice cream is. Getting there. Bit over here, and then we need to get into those drips. So in the drips, we're going to go. And this is all with warm white, and it's a dry brush. Okay, I think I want to take this one across a little bit further. All right, so now we can go back to our pumpkin, and we can do the shading with burnt umber in the tops and the bottoms of each section. All right, almost ready to put our face on our pumpkin. So if you ever paint with me again, if this is your first foray into painting pumpkins with me, this is basically what happens every time I paint a pumpkin. It gets the shade with red and then the shade with burnt umber. All right, so we want this to dry, and we'll put the pattern on for his little face. All right, so I put the pattern on with white graphite, but as I'm looking at my ice cream, I want to go in and deepen some of the shading a little bit with some more of that fresh mango country red mix, but this time just a little bit more country red than we did before. I don't know, it just felt like I needed it a little bit deeper in some sections. So I tried it here, and I like that a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in a few places. I'm just going to widen those floats out a little bit, just to give it a little bit more depth. Because, gosh, you know, this is like a technically correct piece, right? And who knows, maybe I didn't need this at all, but I'm doing it, and we'll see what we get. A little bit on this one. All right. Maybe a little bit here. You know, I could keep playing with this and just keep playing with this. All right, I'm going to call that one done. So let's go to our little pumpkin first. And again, I'm going to dry brush a little bit brighter highlight in the top of each of those sections. I'm going to do that with straight warm white. I'll try not to get carried away on the pumpkin. So I'm just popping up that highlight in the top of each section a little bit. And then let's go ahead and paint in his facial features with lamp black. Won't take very much. So I'm going to paint those in and I'll be back. Okay, facial features on. Let's go ahead and give our little pumpkin some cheeks. They're just going to sit right on top of his smile line, the corners. And I'm going to give him some dragon fruit cheeks. So just nice little pink cheeks. So all my pumpkins have cheeks. I'm also going to dry brush some highlighting with warm white inside each of his facial features. Scrub a little bit of warm white in there. Now, we need to decide what color eyes we want him to have. I think we're going to go ahead and give him some blue eyes. So I'm going to go grab a blue and I will be back. Alright, one of my favorite blues is Moody Blue. And we're probably going to be using it on our little ghosts and probably our skull. So might as well pull it in there now. So what I'm going to do is I am going to get a little closer. And I'm going to float a C-stroke of Moody Blue in the bottom of each eye. So just a nice C-stroke. In the bottom of each eye. I like to give my guys a little character in their eyes. Then I'm going to take my liner brush and I'm going to pick up some Moody Blue and I'm going to pick up some warm white just to make a lighter value of Moody Blue. And I'm going to line a little highlight kind of down in the center of that C-stroke. I can even pick up a little bit more warm white. Make it a little bit lighter. And then I know that his eyes were painted in black, but we're going to paint some pupils in there, and that's going to be with lamp black. And you can just do some little sit downs, little ovals. But since we did that dry brushing and then that C-stroke, you're able to see those pupils in his eyes. Now I feel like his mouth needs a little something something. So I'm going to go ahead and give him a couple little teeth with warm white. And what I'm going to do is just flatten out my liner brush. And just maybe one, maybe two. Just give him a tooth or two. Just to give him some more character. If you want to give him a tooth from the top, that'd be fine too. So we need to let that dry, and then we'll come and do some highlight floats and little dots and things like that. So let's move up to his little stem. And so his little stem, I'm going to line some highlighting on that stem with moon yellow, keeping my hands out of his eyes. I'm just going to start at the top and just pull some lines of moon yellow down through his stem. Then I'm going to get out some evergreen, a little, and I'm going to pull shading into the bottom of his stem with evergreen in my liner brush. And you can pull it up into that yellow that you just put on there. And so we'll let that dry. Okay, so now his little pupils, they need a little highlight dot. So I'm going to take my tiny liner, it's a 2-aught, and I'm just going to add just a little dot of warm white to each pupil. His teeth, we need to set them down into his mouth. So I'm going to take a flat brush and some lamp black. I want to blend it out really well. I don't want it to be real dark black. And I'm just going to float on the bottom of his teeth. And that's going to put his teeth inside his mouth. So while we let that dry and his stem dry, let's go ahead and work on his candy cane. And I think I'm going to give the candy cane purple stripes. So I'm going to get out some purple cow, and we're just going to line those stripes on the candy cane. Now they can be as thin or as thick as you want. Made mine a little thick. And we'll pull this purple in another part of the design. Just think like a candy cane and add those stripes. And I think I might add some thin orange stripes too. So I'm just going to get into my fresh mango with my liner brush and add some little orange stripes in between. These I'm going to keep thin. Okay. So we'll let that dry. Now we can come back to our stem, and I'm going to float some burnt umber across the bottom of the stem, and that's just going to tie it into the pumpkin a little bit more. And you can go up that one side with the burnt umber. So I did it across the bottom and up the right side. On our pumpkin itself, we want to float just a little bit of highlighting around the eyes and the mouth. So I'm going to do a little bit of a moon yellow highlight to the outside edge of each eye. And I'm going to do that highlight across the top of his mouth. And yep, it goes on bright, but it will tone down. His little teeth need to have a little bit of a highlight to reinforce them, and that's going to be warm white, and it's just going to go in the very top of each tooth. All right, I think we're going to call him done. We're going to go finish off our candy cane. I keep wanting to say candy corn, but that's not candy corn. So I'm going to dry brush a highlight on my candy cane with warm white. It's going to go through all the stripes. It makes it already look like it's rounded a little bit more. So while we let that dry, what we're going to do is we're going to get out some strawberry. It's another one of the new colors. And I'm going to float shading on the background around this ice cream cone with very well blended out strawberry. When you get up to where the dish of ghosts and the cup of skull are, you can go ahead and float around those too. So I'm going to start over here and just add some shading on the background around this design. And that's going to help pop it off the background a little bit more. It's a very pretty color. And that gives our candy cane a little bit of time to dry. It's looking yummy. That's looking nice, if I say so myself. And since I'm the only one here, I guess I'm the only one who could say it, right? So just take your time. It doesn't have to be a rush job. See what happens when you hurry? You accidentally load both sides of the brush. Not good. So we're almost done with this one element, and we'll move on to the next one. Now this, I know that the skull is going to have candy worms coming out of it, but we're just going to go right now, we're just going to float across that flat top of that skull. Alright, I'm going to wait to shade next to the eyeballs at the bottom until I get at least the base coat on them. So now we can go back to our candy cane, and we're going to float shading on it with lamp black. That's just going to be on the sides, down the sides. not a wide float, just, and you also want to go across the bottom of it where it's stuck behind the pumpkin. So I always like to just go through and do one side, and then I'll turn it over and do the other side. Looks kind of yummy. I do think that it needs a little bit more right at the base where it goes behind the pumpkin. Okay, and then I'm going to line a little warm white highlight just to reinforce it a little bit. So thin warm white in your teeny tiny brush. Just a nice line. I think we're going to call this thing done. I think. So let's go over to our skull and our cup. And I want to base in the cup with shoreline. And we're just going to give that cup a coat or two of shoreline. I'll get a little closer. I'm going around that, what's sticking out of the, what's exploding out of the cup. It's going to take probably 2 coats. All right. There are a couple of little areas where you can see the cup, like here and over here, so don't forget those. It's kind of like there's a rim. And over here there's a rim. And then we'll go ahead and base in our skull with sand gray. It's a nice skull color, skeleton color. And it will take 2 coats also. And I'm going to go ahead and paint in this stuff that's kind of coming out of the cup with the purple cow. I'm going to go ahead and use a round brush to do that. And we might get lucky with this one and only have to do 1 coat. going to dry this, add a second coat to the skull and the cup, and I'll be back. Alright, so I got that all based in, a couple of coats, and I put the pattern on. And we're going to do this cup, we're going to do it a little kind of different, I guess. I'm going to go ahead and wet the surface of the cup. Just the cup, don't go outside of it, really. And it's a little sloppy wet. And then I'm going to take my liner brush and some thinned Moody Blue. And I'm just going to kind of scribble it around. And you can see how it's kind of bleeding because that cup was wet. And I want to scrub out any large, distinct lines. And we're going to come back and float shading and scrub some highlighting. But I just wanted it to be a little different. You know me, it's got to be a little different. So we want to let that dry. Okay, so this area has dried. We've got a nice mottled look, not like model, but mottled look. And what I want to do now is I want to dry brush some highlighting, and I'm going to do that on the right side. We'll keep everything to the right side, I think. I'll put it on there and see what it looks like. But anyway, we are going to dry brush some highlighting down this right side with warm white. Okay, so just looks like I didn't get enough paint out of my brush, but it's okay. We can soften up those hard edges. All right. And then what I want to do is, you can go ahead and wash out that brush. I'm going to float some shading. I'm probably going to do 2 layers of shading. So I'm going to float the first layer of shading on every edge with Moody Blue first. And then we'll come back and we'll darken it with True Blue. I apologize for my voice. It sees a camera and goes, yeah, I'm not going to work. So I'm going to tuck a little bit up in here, which is kind of the rim. And then I'm going to go down the left side. And this can be a pretty wide float. The next one we do, we'll keep it a little thinner. And I'm going to go on the other side. It's not going to be quite as wide as the float was on the left side. And if you want to mop your float, that would be great. And then let's go ahead and do those brushes across the bottom. And then we also want to go up under this purple, I'm going to call it custard, with a float of Moody Blue. Okay. So we're going to let that dry. I'll probably pull out my handy dandy heat gun and dry that real quick. And then we're going to come back and deepen that shading with floats of True Blue. True Blue is pretty vibrant, so blend it out well. In every place we just floated with Moody Blue, we're going to come back and give it a little float of True Blue. So every edge. And again, this one float on the left side, you want to widen it out a little bit. So I'm just walking that color across that side to widen that float. Right side again is only going to be just like a thin side float. And I kind of made my little cup a little wide in that one spot, so I'll just clean that up. And again, we also want to go across the bottom. And we're going to go under that purple custard again. All right. So this guy's going to have just a little stitch, a scar or a stitch across there, just to give it some more interest. So I'm going to take some soft black, just a tidge, and a liner brush, and I'm going to line a little stitch line across it, just to give it a little bit more creepy interest. And it can be as long as you'd like, or as short as you'd like, curvy, straight, whatever. And just give it some stitches. Now we'll let that dry. If you don't have one of these, it might be a good investment. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them from Sandy McTeer on her website. So I'm going to float just a touch of shading underneath that scar or stitching line with True Blue. Okay, and then I'm going to line some highlighting on the stitches themselves with warm white. Thin down your warm white just a touch. And the vertical stitches are on top, so those will get a little highlight. When I get to a vertical, I'm going to stop and break that horizontal line. So I think let's do a little lined highlight on the cup. Just a faint little warm white stripe. I think that I'd like to come into these corners here and deepen that a little bit. So I'm going to float just a little bit more True Blue down in those corners, just to deepen them a little bit. It's not all the way across the bottom, it's just in those corners. Okay, yeah, I like that better. So now our custard was painted with Purple Cow. So I am going to dry brush a highlight on that custard with Purple Cow plus warm white. I think I'll use my little lunar blender. So I'm just going to mix a little bit of Purple Cow with some warm white just to get a lighter value of Purple Cow. I'm just going to dry brush some highlighting in each of these little dips and drips. So I want to go up onto this area that is where his chin is tucked in. So just kind of brightening those little drips up a little bit. First with the Purple Cow warm white mix, and then I'm going to come in with more warm white and lighten it up just a little bit more. Not quite as much warm white highlighting as what we did with the Purple Cow white mix. So I am going to get out some purple iris. If you don't have purple iris, you could use Diox purple. And we're going to float some shading on our custard. One of the first places I want to go is I want to go with my color down right next to his chin. Just to set his chin into the custard a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and float on the edge of the custard. Now these little areas where the this little curve up here, you want to touch and walk some of that deeper color out, so it makes it look like that's like a dent or something. So I'm going to go in the tip of each drop, and then when I get to the upward curve, I guess I would call it, I'm going to walk that color out a little bit, just to give me those wrinkles, those folds. And there's quite a few of them. So there we go. Allergies have been really tough around here lately. A lot of times this is what I sound like all day long. You can kind of tell where that's supposed to go by the space that was left in between your dry brushes. So that always makes it nice. We also want to float on the custard next to the little skull. Okay, so now he's kind of stuck in there. Let's dry that real quick. And then I'm going to float warm white across this front edge of the custard to put it in front of him. I'm going to go ahead and take that down a little ways on this one and this one. Okay. And it's going to look different when we get the shading on our skull. So what I want to do now is I want to take my liner brush with some warm white, and I'm going to line a highlight on those little drips and splats. Just a little bit to highlight them, just a little touch. It's kind of dry brushed on there. The brush isn't watered down, or the paint isn't watered down or anything. All right. Now I want to pull some of this purple into the cup a little bit, so I'm going to take that purple iris and blend it out really, really well. I'm just going to float a touch of that purple iris in the left side of that cup, and it's not something you can see a whole lot, but it does help to tie that ice cream, that custard, into the cup a little bit. So let's go to work on our skull. Okay, the first thing we want to do to our skull is we want to paint in the eyes, the nose, line the mouth and the teeth with lamp black. So as big a brush as you feel comfortable using to paint those areas in, you want to paint them in with lamp black. This will probably be a fast forward moment. Okay, so I just lined his mouth straight across, and now I'm going to line those little separations that form his teeth. And they're kind of like tornado shape, wide at the top and thin at the bottom. And the same thing in reverse. Top teeth aren't quite as long as his bottom teeth. And I just want to give him a couple of little, like a little crack over here in his skull where it was cracked apart. And if you wanted to, you could put more than one. I'm going to put one for now. I may change my mind. Who knows? Okay, so we're going to dry brush some highlighting on the skeleton itself. and in the top of the eyes and the nose, and we're going to do that with warm white. So I'm going to scrub some in the top of the eyes. Probably about 2/3 of the eye gets it. The top of the nose. And then I'm going to dry brush like off to the sides of his eyes, across the top of his mouth and the bottom of his mouth, and going up into his teeth. You may not see it a whole lot, but it really does help. Every layer of color helps. So as best you can, get some up in there in his teeth. So we're going to give our little skull some cheeks, because every skull has cheeks, right? We're going to do that with some dragon fruit and just a dry brush. So they're just going to set in this wide part of the skull, next to the nose, kind of. And they can go as high as the eye. You know, we need to make sure they're kind of prominent so that you can see them. And then the next thing we're going to do is we are going to float shading on our skull with slate gray. This is just the first shading. We'll add some tints of color too. So I'm going to go down this outside edge on both sides. And yes, it goes right over that cheek we just dry brushed on there. Down the side of his top jaw. Not to be mistaken for a Top Gun. This is his top jaw, his bottom jaw. I'm going to flip this over and float shading on the other side in all those same places. Okay, I'm going to dry this real quick because there's one more little place that I want to drop some shading in with slate gray. And that's going to be where the back part of his head meets the top jaw. I want to float some slate gray right in there. It colors on the top jaw next to that rounder part of his head. I got that a little heavy, but I think it'll be okay. And we also want to float some shading on his lower jaw next to that custard. And I think I might go back and do a little highlight on the custard. I'm not sure. Well, let's see what this looks like when we get our little skull full of mush done. All right, there's my mop brush. Move things around because this piece is a little longer, so my brushes get in the way if I leave them where they are supposed to be. So we just have a couple more little floats to do with slate gray, and those are going to be setting in the inside edge of his eyes and his nose. And so what I'm going to do is the color is going to be to the inside of the eye, and I'm just going to float in that little edge of his eyes, like you can see the inside of his skull. So it's not a float up against the edge, it's a float to form the inside edge. I'm going to turn this around and do his little nose. Might have got that a little dark, but we'll see. It'll probably be okay. And then I'm going to do this other eye. So I'm just giving an inside edge to those eyes and nose openings. And so now we want to get out some Moody Blue again. And we're going to float some Moody Blue down the left side of his face, including his upper and lower jaws. Blend it out. You want it to be like a tint of the blue, not so much a straight blue float. So we're just kind of tinting the left side of his head with some Moody Blue. And I'm going to take that down around the bottom a little ways. So now we need to give him some eyes. And I am going to do that, I believe, with some Irish moss. But first I'm going to set in like a little C-stroke below where his eyes will be. And I'm going to do that with Moody Blue again. So I'm just going to give him like an elongated C-stroke float in his eyes of Moody Blue. And his other eye gets the same thing. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give him some nice round Irish green eyes. I'm going to do that with a liner brush. He looks a little spooky now with green eyes. One coat will do. Just try to keep them as round as you can. We'll let that dry and we'll come back and give him a pupil and some highlights. What I do want to do is I want to get out some warm white and I want to float a highlight on the tip of his teeth just to make those stand out a little more. So just a side load float of warm white. Let's see, put my brush over there again. So I'm just gonna brighten up the tips of those teeth so they stand out a little bit more. I'm going to do the lower teeth also. So he's got a bunch of worms that come out of his head. And most people think green worms. I'm not sure what color worms I want. Maybe green and pink worms. So you can put a pattern on. The pattern is there. But you could also get creative and just kind of take your chalk pencil and draw some worms, lines coming out of his head. It would probably be much easier than trying to put the pattern on. So I'm going to put some green worms coming out of his head first. And don't make them all the same length or anything. I'm thinking a round brush, let me see, or even a filbert, you could put on some good worms. So we're going to put some worms in his head, coming out of his head, with my little number 4 filbert. We'll see how that works. With Irish moss. Yeah, I think that'll be just fine. So I got one worm. Let's get this guy. Make them squiggly. They can overlap. We'll separate them with some shades and highlights. But the filbert seems to do the job just right. Or if you want to make them stick straight out of his head, that'd be fine too. But just add some worms to his skull. You never know what I'm going to come up with here. In fact, let me back up a little bit. I can't decide. All green would be okay. Okay, maybe turn this guy kind of around so I can get this curvy one over here. So I'm basically going to tell you, you can put whatever color you want in here. Maybe red worms. We don't have much red in there. How about some strawberry worms? I want to dry these green worms a little bit. And now the reddish pink worms we put in, we're going to tuck them in between, and some of them may go over the green. I guess what I'm going to tell you is think like a worm. Think like a gummy worm. So I'm going to put one here. And I'll make it go over. And I'll put a big one here. And I think I want it to go behind. So it's going to come out on the other side. Oh yeah, I like pink worms. And let's put one here. And again, I'm going to make this one come out. I'm going to let that green one be on top till I get to the bottom. And let's put one here, and it can go right on top. Let's see. Maybe a little one over here on this side. Can't decide. It's going to squeeze between these two. And I think it needs one here. And that can just squeeze in between. Let's go back and finish his eyes. We're going to need some lamp black. We're going to paint his pupils. And those are just going to be nice round pupils in the center of those green irises that we painted. So we'll give our worms time to dry. Now he's waking up. And let's get a little bit of moon yellow out. We'll be using that on the green worms, so it'll be good to have it out on our palette. And I'm going to line just a little highlight in the bottom of those green irises with moon yellow. Try to stay out of your black. And then he needs a highlight in that pupil. And that's just going to be kind of like a little set down slash that rides it goes into the green and the black. Okay? So just a little diagonal slash. So let's work on those worms. First of all, I need to clean up a little bit where I got the worms in outside his head there. Got it on the skull. And that'll work to kind of highlight that crack too. So I'm going to take the filbert brush that I used, and I'm going to work on those pink ones first. So I'm going to load my brush with the strawberry, and I'm going to tip it into the dragon fruit and into the white a little bit so I can stroke a highlight on the top on those pink worms. Looks like I could have got a little lighter. So I'm going to pick up a little more warm white, and let's do a little bit brighter highlight. Yeah. And it can come about a third, 2/3 of the way down on those guys. So just strawberry plus a little dragon fruit plus some warm white. Yeah, I got whiter. And just a couple more. And now the greens, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pick up some Irish moss on our filbert, and then pick up a little moon yellow to lighten it up, and we're going to do the same kind of thing on the green ones. So I'm going to stroke a little bit of a yellow kind of highlight on them. You'll be really good at worms. All right. This guy gets a little bit, but he's kind of behind that pink one, so he doesn't get too much. And almost there. And notice I'm not filling up that whole thing. There's a little edge there. Doesn't have to be completely filled. So we need to float some shading on our worms. We can float shading on the green worms at the bases with evergreen. And I'm going to float that. I'm not going to stroke it. So just evergreen's a little transparent, which makes it nice. So I'm just going to tuck some green shading at the base of each of the green worms. And kind of walk the color up a little bit. A couple more to do. One more here. I'm going to float shading at the base of the pink worms with Country Red. Same idea, just a float at the base of each of the pink worms. And if you need to tuck it in there, in between green ones, then just go to the side edge of your brush. You also want to float wherever, like right here, this pink worm went behind. So I wanted to add a float there just to shove it behind the worm that's in front of it. And the same thing goes for right here. There's a green worm in front of this one. And last one. So now you're going to take your teeny tiniest liner, and I'm going to get into my evergreen, thin it down, liner consistency, or maybe just a hair thicker than liner consistency. And I'm going to line those little slashes on the worms, the green worms first, because worms seem to always have these little segments or separations. They don't go all the way across. So just add those little slashes or hash marks with evergreen on your green worms. Almost done. Those got a little thick down there, but it'll be okay. One more. And we're going to do the same thing to the pink worms with Country Red, just to make them look a little wormier. In the darkest areas, you're not going to see them. So what I want to do now is I want to float a warm white highlight across the top of the skull. Just to bring it forward in front of those worms a little more. And then I'm also going to take some burnt umber, and I'm going to float shading at the base of the worms across all the colors, just to tuck them into the head a little bit more. So I'm just going to start right in here. Since that little green worm is to the front, I'm just going to start here and tuck a float of burnt umber, just to put them down into the skull a little bit more. Oops, I forgot to put little lines on one of those worms. So let's go back and do that. And probably this side. He's not going to look like very much of a worm. All right. So I think one last thing we want to do to these is we want to line or add just a little bit of a warm white highlight on the tips. It's just a touch, not a whole lot. Doesn't really matter which side you put it on. They just needed to be brightened up just a touch. Now I said I wanted to go back to this custard, and I think that I want to add a little bit of a moody blue kind of reflective float on those drips. I don't know, they just need something. So I'm just going to come through and just a very light little touch of moody blue just in the very tips of those guys. It'll kind of reflect the cup a little bit, but also give it a little bit more dimension. So just a little float of moody blue down in the tip of each of those little custards, drips, or up in the tip, wherever it works out. And then I also want to pull a little bit more purple iris in it, just to give this area a little bit more dimension. So I'm going to just use my little lunar blender and some purple iris, no water, and just right along this edge here where it dips down, I want to give it a little bit of a shadow, kinda. To make it look like it actually dips down. So I want to go back to my worms, and I want to tuck a little bit of shading on the background around them. I'm going to go ahead and do that with strawberry, just to pop them off the background a little bit more. And it doesn't have to go completely around every worm, but just here and there, so that they kind of pop off the background a little bit more. All right. And let's see, I think that I want to go down to this cup, and with a little burnt umber, I want to deepen that shading a little bit more on this left edge. It just needs a little something something, and I think that'll do it. And we can put some sprinkles on our custard. You can do that with any color you like. I'll probably put a few strawberry sprinkles, and surprisingly I don't think I'm going to highlight each one of these. I'm just using my liner brush and setting down a few little sprinkles here and there with strawberry, and I'll probably come in with, I don't know, white or purple, whatever color you want from your palette. Just add a few little sprinkles. So let's go, let me try some white. Little sprinkles here and there. Just to make it a little yummier looking. Okay, I think that's enough. You could come in with green or whatever, but we're going to call this little guy done. Okay, our little worm-headed skull. Now we're going to go over here to our dish of ghosty ice cream. And I'm going to go ahead and paint the dish in with slate gray because I want it to kind of look like it's metal. So I'll be back when I get that based in. And while you're at it, you can base your ghosts in with, I guess you could do them with warm white. That'll be good. All right, so I'll be back in a few when I have my ghost based in, my little cup based in with slate gray, and I'll put the pattern back on for the ghosts. All right, so I put the pattern on for my ghosts, and so we're going to work on those. They are going to be relatively easy, but let's work on this cup first. So what I want to do first is I want to dry brush some highlighting on the cup with warm white. So I'm going to go on the foot, kind of keep it center left. I'm going to get up here around these little ghosts. I must have hit a wet spot on my towel. I picked up some water somewhere. That will make it work. If I scrub it long enough, it'll be dry. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to kind of float some C strokes in here with warm white, but not with that brush. So I'm just gonna pick up some warm white, corner loads, blend it out. And what I want to do is I want to float up in the middle. You can go over your little ghost because they're white. And do this little teardrop shape. And then I'm going to go right next to it and do another one, but it's kind of slanted. Doesn't have to be real dark or definite. And then I'll do the third one. We're just giving it a little bit more of a ice cream dish look. So I'll do one on the other side. They don't have to be perfect. We're just giving the illusion that there's little teardrop embossing on there. And the last one. Then what I want to do is I'm going to come in with some shading. I'm going to start with Moody Blue. And I'm going to float first on the foot of this little dish. Got me a thunderstorm coming through. All right, and we will deepen this. We're going to go down the sides and across the bottom with Moody Blue. So kind of back to back floats up against that float we did in the foot. And while we let that dry, we can start tucking in some very well blended out Moody Blue shading on our ghosts to separate them from each other. Now, this isn't a ghost, this is a cherry. And you can go across the bottom of the ghost. Let's see. Let's go down here and over this guy's head. We can just take that float all the way down to this little bottom ghost. And then we're going to come across the middle guy's head. Need my little mop brush to soften that a little bit. And let's go over just wherever a ghost is on top of another ghost. You want to float this shading. So this ghost, I'm going to go in the bottom where he kind of drips out of the cup and then across there. Let's go on this little front guy across the bottom. And the guy next to him. And let's see. We need to come in here. Separate these two guys. And let's go around the cherry. And a couple more places. I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to get this guy. He's behind that front center guy. And then this guy here. All right. So now what we can do is we can float this moody blue under the ghosts on the dish. So now you can kind of see why it wasn't so important to have those little scallops that are on the dish so prominent. We'll dry brush on them a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and paint that cherry in with country red. It's kind of tucked in there. So what I want to do on these ghosts where you can see their lower edge, I'm going to come back with another float of moody blue, and like here, this where this little guy kind of has like a little wrinkle or a float. I want to walk that color up a little bit, kind of to a low point, just to give him that little look of a ruffle or something. So wherever you can see a little space where there's a little curve or something, you want to reinforce that a little bit with some floats to give him the look of a crease. There's not too many places. You just kind of walk up like a little upside down tornado. I can say that because I live in tornado country. And I'm going to deepen this shading in the deepest V areas. And this little guy here, I'm going to kind of give that a more of a drip look. Got it a little dark. And I'll pat it out. And let's get down into the bottom here a little bit more, a little deeper. So I want to come into those little scallops that I kind of floated on there. I'm going to pick up some warm white on my Lunar Blender dry brush. And I'm just going to kind of dry brush those into more of an existence. They don't have to be real prominent, but you took the time to float those on there, so you need to be able to see them a little bit. Okay. I do also want to come with a Moody Blue float down the sides of the foot. Kind of walk that across a little bit. So let's get out our True Blue and let's deepen the shading on our cup, our dish. I don't want to call it a cup. This is a cup. That's a dish. So blend it out really well. Let's go on the side edges of the foot. On the side edges of the bowl itself. Sorry, I had a little hiccup. And across that bottom. And then I want to go under this ghost. He's the one that's hanging out the most. Can do under this one. Am I even on the picture? Nope. Under this guy. And next to this drippy guy. I also want to go on the foot under the bowl. So I want to reinforce my ghosts a little bit. So I'm going to take some warm white, a side load float of warm white, and I'm just going to float it in the top of each ghost just to make them stand out a little bit more, brighten them up a little bit. Doesn't take a whole lot. You can even leave a little bit more paint on your brush than you normally would with a side load float. I might get a little tricky with my cherry there. We'll just slide our corner of our brush in there. All right, getting there. Our little ghosts are going to need some cheeks, because all my ghosts have cheeks. So that will be our next thing. And being on camera would be a real good thing, wouldn't it? So just kind of highlighted the tops of each of those ghosts. All right, let's go ahead and give our ghosts some cheeks. And I'll do that again with dragon fruit. So each ghost is going to get some little cheeks with dragon fruit. Obviously, they're not going to be real big. Happens all the time. So little cheeks. Kind of under and to the outside of each eye. Kind of brightens them up a little bit. Makes them look a little different than the cup they're in. So let's go ahead and paint their eyes in with lamp black. They're just teeny tiny little ovals. So I'm going to paint in all these eyes and I'll be back. Okay, so while we let those eyes dry, we need to deepen the shading on our little dish. So I'm going to do that with soft black. This is going to help make it look different than the ghosts. So all the places you shaded before, you're going to shade again with soft black. And I can hear you whining, why didn't you just shade with soft black to start with? Well, because we needed that blue in there too. It's all a matter of layers of color. So now I think you can see it's starting to look different. It's not so much the same as the ghosts. And I am going to go under the ghosts. Now those little scallop thingies that we put on our dish, I want to take my liner brush, this is a number 2, and some of that true blue and some of the soft black, and kind of make a wash. Not kinda, go ahead and make a wash. What I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of lightly with that wash line in between each of those little scallop things. Obviously, it doesn't need to be perfect. I think we can go back to our ghosts now, and we can go ahead and just give them a little bit of a deeper shading with True Blue. You really want to blend it out. Don't want this to be really stark. So I'm going to do that just about everywhere that I shaded with Moody Blue. Mainly in the deepest V areas. Like I'm going to do it in here just to really set that guy back. And then I'll come around. He's really behind, so he's going to get that True Blue on him a lot. Let's set these guys a little bit further back. This guy right here, where that cherry is, I want to go here. Let's see, let's go right there and go ahead and take it all the way around the top of his head. Just fill in those little V areas. And let me see, where else? Just right along this side a little bit. Let's give them some little highlight dots in their eyes with our liner brush and warm white. Okay, now let's work on that cherry. We're going to need to dry brush some highlighting on it. I'm going to start with, I think, dragon fruit and warm white. Just a little mix, just to give me a lighter pink. So I'm going to go across this top here, this front center there. I'm going to take some, so I'm going to take my country red and I'm going to pick up just a touch of soft black to give me a little bit deeper color. And I'm going to float on the outside edge and the bottom where it's next to those little ghosts with this country red, dark, soft black mix. So it gets a little whiter down here in the bottom where it's tucked behind the ghost. And then you also want to take this color and float in that little divot for where the stem comes out. Then what we want to do is we want to dry brush a little bit brighter highlight on that top front edge of that cherry with warm white. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and line the stem with soft black. So it's kind of tiny when it comes out of the divot, it's thin. When you get to the end, it's a little thicker. At least that's how I imagine cherry stems. And then I'm going to line a highlight on that stem with that little liner brush and warm white. So along the bottom where those scallops are, I decided to make them eyeballs. So I painted each ball warm white, and then I used my handy dandy Chris Hoy's little painter's pal for circles and stenciled the irises, and I chose Irish moss, moody blue, and purple iris for them. So now I need to go and give my irises some pupils, and those are going to be with lamp black. So you kind of want to see how I'm going to put a little dot where the center of my iris is. So I kind of get them in the middle. And these are going to work up pretty fast. Okay. Already got lamp black on my palette, so I'm just going to add a lamp black pupil to each iris. Luckily, there's only 5. Alrighty. So they're looking like eyeballs already. Let's go ahead and float some moody blue shading around the outside edge of each of those eyeballs. A little too much water in my brush, but it'll be okay. So I'm just going to go through and float one side, and then I'll come back and float the other side. So now before we get too far, I want to go ahead and float shading along this outside edge, this whole outside edge, and above these eyeballs with strawberry. Now we're going to just line some highlighting on our irises. So we'll get a nice, this is a number 4 liner. And on the purple iris, I'm just going to line some highlighting with Purple Cow. Doesn't really matter which side, and I think I should probably pick up a little warm white with that Purple Cow, just to make it a little brighter. On the Moody Blue, I'll pick up Moody Blue and a little warm white, make a lighter value Moody Blue, and line a highlight on that. I could probably even go lighter on that. I'm going to try this first. Okay. It's just a thick line of lighter color. And then on the Irish Moss, pick up that. And I need some Moon Yellow. I change palettes, so I'm going to pick Irish Moss and just a touch of Moon Yellow and line the highlight with that. All right. I also want to line some shading. So on the purple, I'm going to line that shading with Purple Iris, which I know was the base color, but it was very light because we kind of stenciled it on. On the Moody Blue, I'm going to line it with True Blue. And then on the Irish Moss, I'm going to get out my Evergreen again and line the shadow with Evergreen. Doesn't have to be perfect. These are just old eyeballs. So we're going to give our pupils a highlight on whatever side you highlighted the iris on. You want to add a dot of warm white in your pupil. And then I also want to come back and diagonally across from that highlight, I'm going to set down a little slash or just a little set down oval of warm white that rides the black and the iris color. So it's just kind of diagonally across from wherever you did your highlight. So what I want to do now is I'm going to make these bloodshot eyes. So I'm going to take my smaller liner brush and some thinned country red. This doesn't need to have a ton of little blood vessels showing, just enough to give it the idea that this is a bloodshot eye. Alright, so I can see one thing that I really want to do is I want to pop up the highlights on the irises a little bit. And I'm just going to line some warm white to pop them up a little bit more. And that's going to go on all of them. I am going to very, very lightly outline the irises with their darkest color. So on the green ones, I'm going to outline with evergreen, just to make them stand out a little bit more. If you stay up on the tip of your brush, you should be able to get a nice line. And then on the purple one, I'm going to do it with purple iris. And that's just going to define the irises a little bit more. And then of course the blue ones will be with true blue. Alrighty. So our next step is going to be our lettering. Now if you want to paint it by hand, you can, but I will have a stencil available. Oh, you know what? We need a little warm white highlight dot on our cherry. Okay, so I'm going to go get my stencil and I will be back. Alright, so got my stencil on here. I put the hang holes. They're probably not going to match perfectly, but you can get your lettering lined up pretty close by using those hang holes. And I'm going to stencil this lettering on with soft black, with black, lamp black, not soft. And I like to use Chris Hoy's stencil brushes. They seem to work the best for me. Okay, so just a light touch. So now, I'm kind of a stickler for this. You can look at this and you can tell it was stenciled on. So I always like to come back with a liner brush and fill in what I call the bridges. The parts that had to be cut away so you could get the lettering. So I always like to come back and fill those in. And that way it looks more like you did paint them on by hand. And thankfully there's not too many of them on this piece. But I feel like people paint these really beautiful things, you know, realistic looking flowers and everything. And then they use a stencil for the lettering and they don't fill in those bridges, and it just makes it look, I don't know, cheaper. So it only takes a minute or two to fill those bridges in. doesn't just that quickly, and it looks like you hand lettered this. Especially this script part. It looks so much better when you fill in the bridge. The bridges are important to have, but they don't need to be seen in the finished product. So I'm just going to do one little thing to this lettering, I think, and then we'll be done. I'm going to take some strawberry, blend it out, side load float, blend it out, and I'm just going to float on the right side of every letter. Just a quick little float of strawberry. So if there's a right side to a letter, you just tuck a little bit of strawberry in there. And that just helps to bring the lettering up off the background a little bit more. Now if you wanted, you could go crazy and line highlighting and stuff on the lettering, but I don't think I will. I just want to pop that little bit of shading on here. And then we can sign our piece and call it done. I think you've worked hard enough. So this doesn't take too long. But it does make a little bit of a difference. And even if it doesn't to you, I did it, so now you have to too. Okay, let me back off here and see what we got. You could add yourself a wire hanger, you could add beads to it, you could add a bow to it, whatever you'd like. But I just thought it was a cute little saying. And what better to have than Halloween ice cream to go with your project. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again next time.